"John, what's going on here? Who is that with you?" I asked in surprise, opening the apartment door. "Emily, you're going to move in with your mom right now. We'll get divorced tomorrow. I have a girlfriend and we're going to have a baby soon." My husband answered, "My name is Emily. I'm 38 years old. I was born in a small village, but I always dreamed of a big and happy life in the city. After school, I went to conquer the capital. It wasn't easy at first. I was alone. I didn't know anyone, and I only had enough money for the most necessary things. But I didn't give up." She worked several jobs to earn an apartment. And one day, when I was completely desperate, fate smiled on me. I met John. He was so kind and helpful that I immediately fell in love with him. We got married quickly, and soon we had a daughter. We were happy. Together we built a house, raised a child. But something has changed over time. John began to spend more and more time at work. He came home late, tired and annoyed. I started to feel lonely. One evening, I was sitting at home reading a book. I was so immersed in reading that I didn't notice how time flew by. When I looked at my watch, I saw that it was getting late. John was still not at home. I started to worry. I thought he might be with another woman, but then I pushed those thoughts away. He just has a lot of work to do, I thought. He's a workaholic. The phone rang, and I picked it up with a smile. Hello, daughter." "Mom, hi. We haven't talked for a long time. How are you and Dad doing there? Can you put it on loud so he'll listen to me?" Anna asked. "Dad hasn't come home from work yet. How are you and Adam? Does he offend you? He took our beloved daughter north." I said sadly, "How many times have I said that I decided to go myself? After all, it's my choice." The daughter replied, "Okay, it's just that your Adam is often not at home, and I'm worried about you." I replied, "Mom, I'm sorry, of course, but I don't understand what Dad can do at work for so long almost every day," Anna said suspiciously. "Anna, your father works so that we don't need anything. It takes a lot of time and effort. You know perfectly well," I replied firmly. "It's good if work takes away time and energy and not something else," the daughter said quietly. "Anna, what are you implying?" I exclaimed. The words my daughter said turned out to be a slap in the face for me. "I'm sorry, Mom." Anna was silent for a second, listening to her mother's heavy breathing. Then she said, "Mom, I'm sorry for talking so rudely to you. I have to go to bed already. It's the middle of the night here. Love you. Say hi to Dad. Bye." I absent-mindedly answered my daughter's goodbye and dropped my hand from the phone in resignation. I didn't know what to say to my daughter. I couldn't tell her that I was scared too. I'm afraid my husband has stopped loving me. I'm afraid he's found another woman. I sat in silence and stared at the wall. Thoughts were spinning in my head. I couldn't figure out what was going on. I was angry. She was angry not at Anna, but at herself. The fact that I couldn't get rid of these thoughts myself. It was only now, when Anna said them out loud, that I realized how serious they were. One by one, episodes that I hadn't noticed before popped up in my memory. On my 40th birthday, John returned from work late with a bouquet of flowers, but quickly packed up and left, explaining it was urgent work. And he returned only well after midnight, in a tipsy state. One day I felt bad and didn't go to work. In the middle of the day, John suddenly came home, clearly embarrassed by my presence. He said that he had forgotten a gift to a colleague and quickly left, clutching a small package in his hand, which looked very much like a branded underwear store package. And on his 45th birthday, John invited all his friends and acquaintances to the restaurant, including a young blonde in a revealing outfit who kept her eyes on him all evening. The doorbell rang. I shuddered and turned away from the window. John appeared in the doorway. He smiled at me and kissed me. I smiled back at him, but my stomach clenched. I didn't know what to say to him. I couldn't admit to him that I was afraid too. I'm afraid he's fallen out of love with me. I'm afraid he's found another woman. I sat in silence, looking into his smiling face. And deep down I knew that I no longer believed him. I didn't know what was going to happen next. But I knew one thing. I couldn't live like this anymore. I sat across from John and stared intently at his face. I tried to find something in his gaze, in his gestures, in his words that could confirm my suspicions. "Well, why are you looking at me like that? Have you fallen in love?" John smiled. I smiled back, but my stomach clenched. I couldn't get rid of the thought that he was cheating on me. "Why did you stay late today?" I asked. "I told you, we have an inspection from the region this week. We are putting the documentation in order," John replied. "And what happened last week?" I persisted. John was silent for a moment, and then he said, "Last week, the authorities demanded accounting documents for the last year." I nodded. "I see," I said. "You're not in the mood today," John remarked. I took another look at his face. No traces of lipstick, other people's hair, or women's perfume. No signs of cheating, which I've read in movies and novels. I noticed that my husband hadn't changed at all over the years. He still had the same gentle gaze fixed on me, even a soft half-smile. I looked at him now and realized that the suspicions that had arisen a few minutes ago were just a game of imagination and coincidences. The next day, when I looked into the refrigerator, I found that the food supply had run out. John, my husband, was a little sick, so I decided to go myself. I have never used sunglasses. They seemed uncomfortable to me, but today the sun shone especially brightly in my eyes, and I could hardly look at the road. I knew that John often wears sunglasses at the wheel, so I started looking for them in the cabin. I opened the glove compartment and immediately saw them. I reached for them, and my gaze caught on small squares of glossy paper, which stood out in colored spots against the background of familiar papers and things. I picked them up. They were movie tickets. At first, I was taken aback. The letters on the tickets blurred, making it difficult to concentrate. I stared ahead, trying to steady my raging breathing. And then I started to read the text of the tickets. The tickets were for today, for the evening, for a movie session that John and I had been wanting to watch for a long time. At home, I found John on the couch. The man was staring intently at the phone screen, not noticing my condition. For the first few seconds, I wanted to attack my husband with my fists, demand explanations, cry. And then I thought there was an explanation for everything. I approached my husband with movie tickets. "John," I said in a trembling voice. I opened the glove compartment and found this. John looked up at me. He looked confused and guilty. "Emily," he said, "I can explain everything." I stared at him in silence, waiting for his explanation. "I've been wanting to invite you to a movie for a long time," John said, "but I couldn't do it. Today, I thought you wouldn't be busy, and I thought this was my chance. I bought the tickets, but I left them in the car. I wanted to tell you, but you left so quickly. I know it's unforgivable, but I'm very guilty." I listened to John and realized that he was telling the truth. I didn't want to believe that he was cheating on me. "Okay," I said, "I believe you." I hugged my husband and we kissed. I knew I needed to forget about this incident, but I couldn't shake the feeling that John wasn't telling me something. A week later, I was sitting in the living room looking through a family photo album. I missed my daughter very much, and somewhere deep in my soul, I regretted that we agreed to let Anna go so far. An adult sweet girl smiled at me from the photo, so similar to her real happy father next to me. On New Year's Eve before last, I gave my daughter Anna and husband John identical snow white sweaters, which they really liked. I realized that I hadn't seen this sweater among my husband's clothes for a long time. Out of curiosity, I opened the closet, but I didn't find anything. There was no sweater in the other closet either. Surely John couldn't have thrown away my gift? I remembered about another closet in the hallway, where my husband often put unnecessary things. I reached into the closet and took out a dusty large bag. In this package, I saw the same sweater, only now its white color was combined with an incomprehensible red stain, similar to a lipstick mark. Another argument was added to my suspicions, which I tried my best not to take into account. John will come and explain everything, I thought, clutching the ill-fated sweater in my hands. I doubted his loyalty so often that it seemed to me that if I ever asked him a question hinting at treason again, John would just break out into a scandal. He has repeatedly said that he would never change under any circumstances. Although John helped his friends hide their infidelities from their wives, he himself would never have been able to betray me or love. I began to remember the last time John had worn a sweater. I almost screamed with joy when I found an explanation for the lipstick stain. I remembered John wearing a sweater to a corporate party. Then he said that one of his colleagues had drunk too much, tripped, and fell on John's chest. Yes, that's when I put the stain here. Why didn't he ask me to wash it? I thought. Another answer to this question. He probably didn't want to disturb me. I knew that the lipstick wouldn't wash off completely anyway. I put the sweater back in the bag and put it on the mezzanine. I decided I wouldn't think about it anymore. I trust my husband, and I know that he will never cheat on me. The bell rang in the middle of the night. I woke up first and, half asleep, began to look around for the source of the sound. The phone on John's bedside table was vibrating. When I was going to wake my husband, I bumped into an empty place with my hand. John wasn't there. It took a moment before I saw the light on in the bathroom. At this time, the phone went silent. I lay down again and tried to regain the lost sleep. Drowsiness began to overtake me when I heard the whisper of a man's voice. John was muttering outside the bathroom door. Periodically, the whispers turned into muffled screams, which made me listen. I threw off the blanket, intending to go there and find out what was going on, but John beat me out of the bathroom on tiptoe. In total darkness, he went to the bed and lay down quietly. I lay with my eyes open, deciding to start a conversation. "Who were you talking to?" I said, my voice hoarse from sleep. "Oh, are you awake, my love? My colleagues do not give me rest even at night. The situation in the company is like this, checks after checks." I sighed. The explanation only partially calmed me down. I didn't want to believe in my husband's infidelity, so I grabbed at any more or less reasonable explanation. John turned away from her, thinking hard about what he was doing and how to deal with his wife's guesses, which were getting bigger and bigger every day. The next morning, I received another message from my husband, in which he apologized and asked me not to wait for dinner. I understood that all this was the cost of the profession, but suspicion made her doubt every step of her husband. It seemed to me that something was wrong with my relationship with John, but I stubbornly refused to believe in the truthfulness of the accumulated guesses. In the evening, when John returned home, I tried to act as if nothing had happened. I cooked dinner for him, talked about business at work, but my heart was restless. I kept waiting for him to talk about it himself. But John was silent. He was having dinner, watching TV, and didn't even look at his wife. I couldn't stand it and asked, "John, did you really talk about work?" "Yes, of course," he replied without looking up from the screen. "Why are you bothering me?" "I'm all good. Don't worry." I didn't believe his words. I felt like he was hiding something. But what? And why? I didn't know what to do. I wanted to talk to John openly, but I was afraid that he would reject me. I was afraid of losing him. The doorbell rang in the apartment. I was surprised when I went to open the door for a late guest. A courier stood on the threshold with a rich bouquet of pink peonies. Had John decided to make amends for his absence? But I like chrysanthemums, I thought, stretching out my hands to take the flowers. "I'm sorry, Amanda," the courier said, handing me a clipboard with paper. "Could you sign first?" "Amanda?" "My name is Emily." I was surprised. I looked at the flower delivery agreement and saw my husband's name and address. Except there really was some kind of Amanda in the recipient's place. The courier denied the possibility of an error and was going to call the customer's specified number to solve the problem of inconsistency. I convinced him not to do it. I wanted to find out with my husband one-on-one what all this means. At first, I wanted to wait for John to come. I was anxiously looking at a vase with a bouquet intended for some unknown Amanda. Even now, I didn't want to jump to conclusions, even though another woman in my place would have already started a quarrel. Time was moving forward. I was sitting in the same place, completely lost in thought. John still didn't come. I have justified him so often, believed in his excuses, that now I unconsciously did the same thing in advance. The door creaked around midnight. A man quietly entered the apartment. He stopped being careful when he saw the light on in the kitchen. I didn't even look at John when he asked me with a big smile what I was doing here. The man's smile faded a little when he saw the peonies in the vase. He realized that he had made a mistake and had written down the wrong address during registration. John wanted to start a conversation, but he couldn't figure out what I knew. "Who is Amanda?" I asked coldly, looking up at my husband. "Which Amanda?" "Oh, you mean my colleague Amanda?" The husband asked in surprise. "I'm talking about Amanda, who you ordered a bouquet for." I replied calmly. "No, I ordered the bouquet for you," he frowned. The courier asked me to sign, and I saw that the flowers were not ordered in my name. I replied resentfully, "How can it not be yours?" I asked my colleague Amanda to place an order for my beloved wife. I was busy with the next paperwork and asked my colleague Amanda. John scratched his head. Once again, I felt relieved. This story only showed that her husband loves her so much that even when busy he finds ways to please her. Life is back on track again. John couldn't take me to the hospital because his boss called him and said they were in a scheduled meeting. I have had headaches for the second day, for which no available medicine helped. The nearest clinic sent me for tests on the other side of the city. Therefore, now I was indignant and walked towards the clinic. It was my first time in the area and I was looking around enthusiastically, passing by a restaurant with a panoramic window. She stopped and looked closer. John was sitting at a table by the window, talking to a young girl. She noted that outwardly the interlocutor of her husband could pass for the same age as her daughter. Meetings don't always take place in the office. It's possible that the boss decided to gather them here, I thought. This girl just arrived before the others. I reassured myself and desperately did not want to accept the truth. Even then, when John took a young girl by the hand, I was looking for an excuse for this. He can't cheat on me with a girl the same age as Anna, I said mockingly in my head. John got up and helped the girl to stand up. She stopped and kissed the man on the lips. It was only at this moment that I tore off the evil eye rose-colored glasses. It was only at this moment that I crossed out all the excuses and took all the suspicions at face value. I felt a stabbing pain in my chest and was ready to rush there to them so that he would stop making a fool of her. I had already taken a step when I saw that my lover had moved away from John. In a gentle gesture, she put her hands on her rounded stomach. I was shocked. I looked at the roadway, making sure there were no cars, and came to the other side, turned around once again, watching her faithful beloved husband carefully holding her mistress on the steps until today, and then I quickly disappeared behind the hospital building. I understood that I had been living a lie for so many years. I think he just liked making a fool of me. I ran home and tears were treacherously rolling out of my eyes. I ran home, fell on the couch. I was torn even more. The beloved person with whom I lived for so long deceived her so easily. There were so many thoughts in my head that I just didn't understand how to deal with it. No, I'm not going to let John become a father again, I said loudly. However, no one answered her. I decided to wait until my husband decides to leave me. And as soon as that happens, I'll tell him everything I think about him. When John returned home a few hours later, he took off his coat and came to the kitchen where I was doing my business. "Hello, spouse. Why are you so sad?" he asked. "Nothing. I was just thinking," I replied tensely. "Are you going to have dinner?" I asked. "Oh, no, thanks. I already had dinner. I had a business meeting," he replied. "Well, then I have nothing more to offer you," I smiled. John went into the bedroom. I stood there for a long time and thought about the best way to deal with this situation. I was uncomfortable with the memory of my husband gently stroking another woman's stomach. I knew that sooner or later he would admit that he was going to have a baby soon. It was a shame not even for myself, but for my daughter. She probably won't understand this, because her father's mistress is about her age. I waited for John to confess, but as time went on, he just kept quiet, pretending that everything was fine. And again, I began to convince myself that it was just a coincidence, that this was not his mistress at all, but maybe some kind of acquaintance or relative. And I started to do it. In principle, everything was exactly the same as before. I almost convinced myself that I had imagined it. We lived as before. I was cooking dinner, waiting for him from work. Sometimes he would talk about what was going on there. One day something happened that changed me forever. It was an ordinary winter evening. I was sitting in the apartment watching TV. John was not at home as usual, but that was the order of the day. I heard the key turn in the door lock. John returned home. I heard the front door open. John came into the apartment, and I immediately felt that something was wrong. He was not alone. There was a young pregnant girl standing next to him, the same one I had seen earlier. I stood silently and looked at them, and he smiled. The room smelled unpleasantly of alcohol. "Wife, you'll have to move in with your mom," John said with a smile on his face. "What did you say?" "To Mom?" I replied, overcome with anger that I had never felt before. "We bought this apartment together. There is a share of our adult daughter here, who, upon learning about this crook, will forever refuse to communicate with you. If I were you, I would leave here, because staying here, you can lose not only your life, but also your unborn child," I said, turning to his girlfriend. "Emily, you're saying something like that," John said. "Do you think I'm joking? Did you think I was quiet?" I shouted. I picked up a heavy book that came to my hand, swung it, and hit my husband on the back with all my might. He even screamed. "A few more minutes of your being in this apartment, I will start hitting her," I said, looking carefully at the frightened face of the young mistress. "Let's get out of here. She's crazy," she exclaimed and grabbed John's arm, trying to leave the apartment. "Well, get out of here so that I never see you here again," I shouted after them after the front door slammed shut. I fell to the floor. The book fell out of my hands. Tears poured out of my eyes. I was very offended. The phone rang. The screen showed that it was my daughter calling. I wiped my tears and answered. "Mom, we'll come next week. My husband was given a vacation," said the daughter. "My daughter, I will be waiting for you very much. You are my dearest person in this world." John returned early in the morning. He opened the doors with his key, entered the house as if nothing had happened. But when I saw my suitcases in the hallway, I was surprised. Are you crazy? Where am I going? He asked with surprise in his voice. I don't care. Go to the place where you spent the night. Come on quickly. Anna's daughter is coming soon, and she's definitely not going to be happy to see you, I replied. Have you already told your daughter that I cheated on you? He asked. Of course, I informed her. She needs to know that soon she will have a brother or sister. I said. Everything is canceled. Amanda is pregnant, but not by me, I replied. Well, no way. I've made up my mind that I want to divorce you. So take your suitcases and go wherever you want. I have some savings, and I can compensate you for your part of the apartment. I'm not kidding. It's best for you to leave. Anna won't forgive you anyway, I said. He took his suitcases and went downstairs, and I stood in the hallway for a long time, looking at the closed door. I felt sorry for my husband, but I remembered the words of my daughter, who forbade me to forgive my father. After betraying her once, he would betray her again and again. We got divorced 2 months later. I paid John for his part of the apartment, and now he does not apply for housing. How do you like this story? Write about it in the comments. Let's get 1,000 subscribers on this channel in the new year. I love you, my friend.